Hello everyone, this is the Beta75 Pro 2, featuring 802 12,000 kV motors, 40mm quad blade props. It's a single board stack with an F4 flight controller with an OSD, 5A 4-in-1 ESC with a peak current of 6 amps, a PAL camera with 100 to 120 degrees field of view, 25mm VTX with smart audio for changing your bands and channels. Battery lead is PH20 for two 1S batteries. It weighs 27.5 grams. Motor post I am getting 75mm. Comes with two camera mounts, one for 25 degrees, the other one for 35 degrees. Also comes with these two little jumpers so you can fly it in a 1S configuration. And does come in a form-fitted box. And one thing you're probably going to notice right away, that field of view. While this does fly very comparatively to the Mobula 7, the field of view kind of kept me from being able to reach at least my potential as far as how I typically fly in the house. So if you're looking at this video and saying, well, you're not flying as fast, that's true. And it's mainly due to the camera and the limited field of view. 100 to 120 degrees, it's not much. And my first series of flights, maybe my first 10 or 15 flights, were just chock filled of crashes galore, because it really felt like stuff was sneaking up on me. And you may notice this as well if you look closely at the screen, that stuff kind of, even though I know my typical path very well, it just feels like stuff gets on me really quick, and then I can't respond quickly enough to keep away from the crash. We do have one bump that comes up. The other thing you're probably looking at is the fact that the camera switches from color to black and white, so that is something to be aware of. Also, there's the bump on the treadmill there, but I do recover. Also, if you're a rapid fire user, you are going to probably need to use, at the very least, mode 2, if not legacy mode on this, or you'll get a rolling screen. And I'll show you back at the desk, give you a little picture-in-picture of what to look for when that's happening. I think the one thing that they didn't do in this, and I'm a little surprised in the iteration, is they did scrap the larger VTX that they used in the previous iteration, the 75 and 65X, and they went with a smaller VTX that is only running 25 milliwatts. I know I hear a lot of people wanting 200 milliwatt, probably for those difficult FPV environments, or actually just to try to help you with range or a clear image. But I do think also that these motors, this prop combination, this weight might be a bit quieter, but you can judge that one on your own. I only mention it so that maybe you'll take note of that if that's an important feature for you. We are going to get a fairly lengthy flight time as well, because they dropped from the two board stack to a single board stack. That brings our weight down quite a bit, and that's going to help us with our flight time. That's the combination. I did just pretty much annihilate one canopy in my flights. In the quick roll where I showed you the specs, that's a fresh canopy that I pulled out of my bin in order to put on there. So I'll show you a look at that canopy that did break. I think that's something else that they could improve, is redesigning the canopy. Instead of giving us internal mounts, which is nice. I'm glad they give us more than one mount for our camera angles now. But I do think it would be better, and this is my personal opinion, if we could just adjust the camera angle on our own. Not everybody is going to want to fly with either of the two given, and then you're looking at doing some sort of manipulation of either the camera mount itself, or you're going to be looking at maybe designing and printing your own canopy mount. I'm sure there's lots of canopies available on Thingiverse, or at least camera mounts. We did an adjustable camera mount. Robert Thompson designed one for the Beta75 and 65X. I'm sure that would work with this camera, because the form factor of the camera isn't that much different, so I would suspect you could make that work as well. You do have to modify your canopy in order to be able to adjust the camera angle with that 3D print. But as you've seen, I do get into it. As always, I get better in the battery. I don't know why that is. Every time I fly, the first part of the battery, I'm just not all that great, and I finally get comfortable in the sticks. Doesn't matter if it's the first pack of the day or the 15th pack of the day. They always start like that. I guess I just slow to warm up. Also note, when I go around the island there, the light shifting, you could probably see that it gets a little bit different there in the view when you get that sunlight coming through the window over the kitchen sink. We will be looking at an outside flight. We'll also be looking at a 1S flight next, so we'll have plenty of flight footage for you to look at. As you can see, we're coming up on 4 minutes, and we've got low battery, so time to land. So this is our 1S flight, and I am using a 450 milliamp 1S battery. And right off the bat, you're going to notice this is quite a bit slower, and that's to be expected. You know, when you're running less juice through those motors, the props don't spin as fast, and you don't fly as aggressively. But the upside to all these whoops and being able to do 1 and 2S is depending upon where you're at in your FPV journey. 1S might be where you're most comfortable right now, so you can put that little jumper in one of the 2 battery leads, plug in a 1S battery like this 450 milliamp. You could fly a bigger one. You could do a 550. I think there's also some 600s that are available out there in order to get longer flight time. But remember, as you add battery weight, that doesn't always equal more flight time because you have to tow that battery around. Also notice in the top left, that is my throttle position, and we're running just about double of what we were on the 2S flight. And that also shouldn't be a surprise, but I wanted to draw that to your attention. Also, on the power configuration for beta flight and getting our low battery warnings, I didn't shift those around. I left those at the default, and I did find that with most of my batteries, they did recover to about 3.45 volts per cell. So I presume that once we unplug those from the machine itself, that they should come back right at about 3.5. Not all my batteries did, though, and that's something to note. You know, batteries wear differently. Not all batteries are created equal. So depending upon what batteries you're running, you may want to pump that up in order to keep your battery maintenance at the level that you're looking for. We're not going to nearly get the flight time on 1S, even with the 450 milliamp battery, that we do on 2S, and that shouldn't be a surprise either. It's something to note is that you're not going to always get a longer flight time if you're running 1S versus 2S. Generally, you're going to get a longer flight time with 2S, but that depends on the size of the batteries that you're running as well. Of course, you can change the battery lead out if you'd rather go with an XT30 and a larger, not necessarily larger, but a heavier battery, a multi-cell battery, rather than 2 1S batteries. Next up, we're going to take a look at the outside flight. And probably the main thing I would want you to draw your attention to, and I didn't tune this out. I believe it comes with a PID tune, and I'm going to show you that back at the desk. But when I do snap rolls, I do notice that it doesn't necessarily lock into place when you level the stick out. And also, it feels like in flight, there's a little bit of movement with the ducts or the motor mounting. It feels like those kind of wobble on it a little bit. I don't think you're going to see it in flight, but in person, I felt like I could hear it. Not quite being, you know, that stiff, same sound that I expected to hear when I've listened to others and doing those same sort of maneuvers. It's a little tiny flight characteristic thing, but it's something that you should know when you have one of these machines. If you're doing snap flips or rolls, that you may feel the motors not necessarily hold their position exactly. But again, we're looking at plastic frames. Also, I am flying at about 43 degrees outside, and we're going to see a few crashes as I get a little bit ugly. They're not major crashes by any sort. Here's a bump. There we go. A little bump into the swing set. Give a little love tap. But later on in the flight where I do some dives for testing purposes, I nearly get hung up at a tree, and I think I bang it into another tree when I'm out flying that around. So we're going to have lots of flight footage here to look at. Of course, you want to take in the camera as well outside and see what you think of this camera. Again, the field of view is 100 to 120 degrees, and for me, that's a bit of a miss. I really expected a larger field of view, especially for inside flight. I think the smaller field of view, for me, it makes it tougher to fly with the speed that I want and be able to maneuver, especially inside the house where everything is much closer. But from what I could tell online, most people are still flying these outside, so that may not be a strong concern for you. And I do a couple of quick turns just to kind of show you what that looks like. It seems to hold its position pretty well. It is going props out. I do a little bit of an awkward orbit here to try to just kind of kill off this battery, I guess. I think it's going to recover after I get done trying to lock this in, which I fail at. But it doesn't really recover as much as I expected. So we have to end this flight, and then we'll go back into the dive flight, which is a longer flight. So the previous flight that I showed you was just about 2.5 minutes, and you can definitely get longer flights than that outside. I have a feeling that the batteries I was using during that flight weren't quite up to snuff, probably been abused a little bit too much, maybe they're a little bit too old. That's probably the main reason why that flight was a little bit shorter than expected. We're going to get back up over 3 minutes in this flight, even though I bounced off of several inanimate objects here in the backyard, but we'll do a few dives. And you probably won't be able to see it in the dives. Now, on the Beta FPV website, they kind of have this strong disclaimer that they have completely resolved the washout. And I think they've done a pretty good job, but I don't think it's completely gone, because I do feel what I would call as a kind of a twist when I do the dives, and I don't think you'll be able to see it in the FPV view, but I wanted to make sure to kind of note that, is that it feels like it does start to do the washout a little bit, but it kind of brings the nose up a little bit quicker than you're doing it on the sticks, and then a little bit to the right on yaw as well. Some of these dives aren't very clean, but again, I'm just kind of out doing some testing and putzing around. But if you notice that, I don't see it in the FPV view, but I really felt it on the sticks. It was pretty minor. I think I should make that a pretty strong point. It was very, very minor. It may have to do with the fact that maybe my props are bent up or something from all the crashing that I've done, and that had played some sort of role in why I was experiencing that, what I'm calling a twist. I'm not calling it a yaw washout, because I don't feel, oh, here's where I get almost hung up in the tree, scraggle is everywhere. But I kind of felt that twist on dives, something to be aware of. But it is a very good flying machine. I think it flies very comparatively to the Mobula 7, just without the adjustable canopy. And of course, we have a different field of view on the camera and a different camera itself. If you're looking for my take on the camera, and I don't think I'm very discernible about these things, I've come to know that I'm more sensitive when it comes to the field of view than I am with the actual colors of the cameras. But this one feels like it's sharp, but it also feels like the colors are too dark, especially if you look into these shadowy areas. You can't see very well into those, and I think that isn't as good as previous cameras. None of these cameras are very good outside. That's until you get into something like an EOS or a Runcam Nano. These cameras, these little tiny CMOS cameras, they're just not very good outside. So we either have to add weight and add a bigger camera, or we just have to handle it as hobbyists, that this is just what we're asking. When we're looking at something at sub 30 grams, it's not going to have a 4-gram camera or more on it. Hopefully the flight footage that I've been showing you shows you how it flies, and you get a pretty good feel for its abilities. I'm not flying it with the higher degree camera mount on the outside flights. I'm using the same camera mount, the 25-degree camera mount inside. Here's where, oh, there, yep. I go ahead and just tap the throttle to bounce it down out of there. Maybe that's why I broke the canopy, but no harm, no foul. We can go ahead and take right off and go have some more fun. I wang it there because I try to do a roll through the tree, and now I can't get out of there because I've probably got a leaf stuck up in my props and not able to take off. So that flight was only 3 minutes and 22 seconds, so you can expect to get at least that in your outside flights. Before I take this foam pad out to show you the bind and the boot button, I do want to show you how I was running my batteries. I was plugging them in, and I was mounting them vertically in here, and it did require a little bit of foam under there to keep things nice and firm. And then you just plug in your 2 battery leads and you're good to go. The batteries do not fit in horizontally like this, or at least you can't fit them as well. You're going to get a little bit of a bowing here with your top, so it won't sit flat. Also, this little foam pad did come with my model. Hopefully they're putting that in all the boxes, but I trimmed off the front so I could slide it in. I slide it in from the back to the front. That way I have this little tab here, and I can just shove batteries in. I keep those 2 tabs so I can just shove the batteries in. This doesn't move around all that much. But you can see hopefully fairly clearly here. Let me zoom the camera. We've got some nice placement for our bind button there on the top, and then we have the boot button there on the side. You only need the boot button, say, if you want to flash a new version of Betaflight and you're having troubles getting to DFU mode, which is flash mode For the flight controller, of course, the bind button, you use that. It comes in several different varieties as far as the receiver protocol goes. You got built-in for FrSky. Futaba's also built in, and then you've got, if you got the EU version of FrSky, that they have they attach another receiver to it, DSMX or Spectrum, and also FlySky. You can also buy this without a receiver and then add your own afterwards. So you can get it in all the major protocols that I'm aware of as far as receivers goes. So if you already have a radio, you don't necessarily need to switch out of that protocol. I mention that because I get a lot of questions about different radios. There's a lot of people out there that have like the i6S FlySky remote, and they want to join the Whoop fun as well. And this has the ability to add different receivers, so you can do that. You can order it with the receiver that you need. Back to the batteries there for a moment. We know Beta FPV, they have their 300 milliamp, and then we have the G&Bs. There's a whole host of these particular batteries around. Personally, for me, I prefer the G&B 300s. I found that I got better punch and flight time with these batteries. The Beta FPV batteries, they work fine, but I just prefer the G&Bs a little bit. If you were to go to an XT30 version like this, I'll show you that these do fit. This is the Race Day Quads version of a 2S 300 milliamp. It's pretty tight in here, but it does fit in just fine. Also, I have the TBS version, which is as far as visual and weight, and it's very, very close to the RDQ one. I can't say that these 300 2S batteries are actually all that much different. I barely notice anything in flight. So use your dollar to support your manufacturer or shop that you'd like, but that also fits in there very, very well. Those are both high volt batteries. I also have a G&B 300 2S battery. Same size, same leads, they're pretty much the same, I think, and it fits in here nicely as well. Very tight, should not come out, and does sit just fine and flat. The last battery that I'll show you is a Nanotech. I don't necessarily recommend these, but some people can't get batteries where they live, so you may have to go with something from Hobby King. And these are smaller batteries, but they do fit in here still fairly well. You may find that you need to add a piece of electrical tape or something in order to make it real tight, like these other batteries. These are put in real snug. I don't think you'll have to add anything in there if you choose to go with an XT30 lead. Of course, if you want to add that XT30 lead, if you've already got your package of leads, you can just snip off here and solder on, or you can replace the wire. Depends on what you want to do. So you might be able to tell, it looks like they have changed the frame a little bit. Another iteration, they've got a spot back here for LEDs, but it is not included. I also added this zip tie, the ability for this to wiggle back and forth. There is a mesh of the kind of the thin coax antenna that works as the ground, and if that wiggles and breaks off, because those mesh wires are very, very small, then you'll probably have range issues with your VTX. So I would encourage you to secure that down and keep that from wiggling around. Also, that canopy I'd mentioned I'd show you. This is the canopy. These things they're going to break. Eventually you're going to crack them, and eventually you're going to break them, and you might find yourself where you have to replace them. You can find these, of course, from Beta FPV. Beta FPV also sells quite a bit on Amazon. I picked up these more stylish ones off of Amazon. I particularly like this blue one, this kind of a star or sky, or I don't know. But so you could pick up more colorful ones, you can get clear ones, you can get, I'm not certain about all the different colors they have, but I'll link down below to some canopies on Amazon, so in case you need to pick up some real quick, if you're a Prime user, you can do that. But the canopy is the one thing it's going to break. The Beta FPV frames have been known to be very, very durable. They're a little bit more flexible than other Whoop frames we've seen, and so keeping the weight down, I think this flies substantially better than the 65 and 75X, and I also think it's very comparable how it flies to the Mobula 7 in its original form. I don't think it flies quite as good. The difference is very, very small. It's going to take a very picky pilot to pick that stuff out. So if you're looking for the absolute best, which is a question that comes up all the time out of this, you kind of have to pick your poisons. You know, the Mobula 7 now has a couple of different iterations of frames. The first ones were cracking all over the place. A lot of people reporting that. Then we've got the V2, which is the black one, and then you've got the V3, which is the trash can version. But these Beta FPV frames, I don't think I've seen too many of these break. It's going to take a pretty severe crash, but the canopy itself is going to break. And I would say that their mounting, if they continue to use this sort of material, and I don't know if this is a mold, it looks awful good for a print. Let me see if I can get this focused real nicely here for you. I don't think that's a print, but maybe it is. I'm not a printing expert, but it's very flexible. And the good thing about that is, so if you take a direct camera hit, that it should give you some fighting chance that the camera won't take a damage, that this will just bend on impact rather than breaking your camera. Just taking a quick peek under the hood here, you can see where we've got a VTX. This is your receiving antenna. They've just kind of wrapped it around the camera lens here, and it comes down to the board right here. And then you've got these wires. These wires could be shorter. They used a little bit more than they needed to. And then we've got color-coded wires, so if you did want to replace the camera, red is positive, black is negative, and yellow is your signal, so you know exactly how to work that out. And it does, there is a little bit of extra length there too, but it's not too bad, not as much as we have back here. And then we've got our antenna wire, how it comes down and underneath side, and then that's secured down with a little bit of foam tape. But that's just a quick peek inside of what it looks like underneath the canopy. I mentioned in that 1S flight how you just use this jumper, and it's very straightforward. These are actually little computer jumpers. We used to use these all the time in technology, but you just push those over the metal posts. That closes the circuit, so you can just use the other one. And it doesn't matter which one you use, just do put that jumper into one of them. It shouldn't come out. I would think it feels pretty firm in there. That shouldn't be an issue. And then you just plug your one battery in and you go away and you can fly on 1S. I think they've moved in the right direction, keeping the weight down, keeping their frames nice and durable. It's a very good iteration, coming in at $99.99. This is another option you need to look at when you're looking at your 2S and 1S brushless whoops. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in that section down below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.